I bet you're here because you're bokeh junkie like I am and you want to know how different lenses with different focal length render the background when shooting wide open. I was just as curious as you are, so I reached out to Sigma Germany and asked them whether they'd be interested to link me some lenses for this video. Thanks to them, I can now show you the results of my experiment. Spoiler alert, as a bonus at the end, I have a few shots from a regular shooting with the lens I liked best. Let's start at the creek in the forest. I shot from two different distances with each lens to give you a better idea how the distance influences the background blur, or bokeh if you will. Let's start with the wider shots. Before I dash through all the different focal lengths of the Sigma Art Lens series, let me draw your attention to the blur circles that the highlights create. That's why I wanted to get into the forest for the first of our 3-image series. The first image was shot with a Sigma Art 24mm at f1.4. When you don't get too close, you can see that the distortion is pretty okay, and you can still see a bit of separation from the background because the really low f number of f1.4 creates some background blur. That of course would be much less at f1.8 or higher. Next, 35mm f1.4. The field of view is logically more narrow and the background blur already increased. The next image, 50mm f1.4, followed by 85mm f1.4. I bet you already understand why 85mm is such a popular focal length. Okay, we have two more lenses to go. Next is the exceptional 105mm f1.4. A brick of a lens, but it creates an incredible look. Look at that background separation. That's one of a kind. And the last one for the wider shots is the 135mm. Please note the 135mm art is an f1.8 lens. That's 2/3 of a stop darker, so I had to shoot at 1/100th of a second instead of 1/160th of a second. Luckily, I was still able to stay at ISO 100 with all the shots, despite the rainy weather and the pretty dark forest. Okay? Next, let me move a little closer and start at 24mm again. Being that much closer, you see that the distortion of my wife is much more pronounced. That's not everyone's cup of tea. Next up is the Sigma 35mm f1.4. Much better in regard to distortion and quite some creamy background blur. I personally love that combination of background blur but still seeing quite a bit of the environment. And that's why 35mm f1.4 is great for weddings in my opinion. Next up is 50mm, 85mm, 105mm, and finally 135mm. Personally, in this case, I feel the 135mm has a bit too much compression. I think my favorite for this second series is the 105mm. But I have to admit that it was a bit tricky to keep the camera at the same level, so that might have an influence too. That will get better in the next two series. On to the next one. Our lovely model Esther. You know her from my video The 5 Factors of Background Blur. You might want to check out her Instagram at Esther_ma_re. A little weird. This one was shot in the shade right before the sunset, so the light levels were already pretty low. I used a fast shutter speed to show one of the strengths of these f1.4 lenses. They let an incredible amount of light into the camera. Initially, I wanted to shoot jumping shots, but for the best possible repeatability, we settled for this pose instead. The images were shot at 1/2500th of a second, f1.4, ISO 200. If you wanted to get that with the popular zoom lenses with f2.8, you'd already end up with ISO 800. I simply love that these lenses give me the option to shoot indoors in bad lighting at usable ISO, even in not professional sports arenas. I love to use primes for these scenarios. Have a look at this shot at f1.4, ISO 800. At f2.8 I would have ended up with ISO 3200. So these lenses make really good sports lenses too. Have a look at this one, shot with the Sigma 135mm f1.8 art, after sunset. Okay, but I'm digressing. You are here for the comparison. Let's start with the wide angle at 24mm again. Nice, but the background blur isn't all that great. We would have to move closer for a more pronounced separation. Not all that much more blur this time with a 35mm, but we also don't have any highlighted blur circles due to the different location. At 50mm it's already a bit more, but the fun this time really starts with 85mm. Let me compare that again to the 50mm. I feel the 85mm really draws you in. 2 more to go. Next is 105mm. I feel there isn't all that much difference to the 85mm this time. And finally, 135mm f1.8. I have to say, for this scenario, I would choose between the 135mm and the 85mm. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. One thing I want to mention before we move on to the next scenario, because I often hear that lenses need to be stopped down because they aren't sharp wide open. Let me just casually zoom into this image. I would say it can't get much sharper than that. And that's the same with all lenses in the Sigma Art Lens series. They are tack sharp at f1.4. Please remember, I don't say that because I get sponsored by Sigma. No, they just lended me these lenses. In the end, I even bought one additionally to the 135mm f1.8 that I already owned. Either way, on we go to the next scenario. A weirdo with a hat that needs a tourist guide for his own hometown. Let me start with the wide shot again. This is where I feel the 24mm shines. This time I'm closer than before, and that renders the foreground sharp but already blurs the background quite a bit. I have to say, I really love the look of these kind of shots. The 35mm increases the background blur, but due to the narrow field of view already makes it difficult to really get a feel for the location. The longer the lens gets, the more blurry the background obviously gets, but also the more arbitrary. This is 50mm and here is 85mm. For a regular portrait scenario, this would work pretty well. But for an on-location portrait, where you want to show the location too, I like the 24mm f1.4 much better. Here is the 105mm and the 135mm. Before I show you the bonus shots and tell you which lens I bought, let me just dash through the wider shots. First, 24mm, with quite a bit of distortion this time. Look at my feet. Then the 35mm, much better in this regard, but again the cut-off roof of our museum. Next is... oh wait, no next yet. Before we continue, here are a few very quick words from our sponsor. Wolf Amri, you have 10 seconds, so you'd rather be quick. Hi, I'm Wolf. I've worked 3 years on a set of revolutionary photography courses that will launch in a few months. If you want to learn photography fast and remember what you learned for the rest of your life, get on my mailing list to get notified about the launch. Okay, I guess it was enough. Thank you, Wolf, for your pity contribution. To be honest, I've seen them. His method really works, and one of the courses will be totally free here on YouTube. Next, the 50mm. Then the 85mm, 105mm and 135mm f1.8. And now the bonus material. While I show you some pictures of a regular shooting in the background, let me tell you which Sigma Art lens I bought. It's the 85mm f1.4. It is similar to my 135mm f1.8, but particularly the new Sony version is extremely lightweight and compact. All that while being incredibly sharp. And that convinced me. What I also like on the Art series, other than on my Sony native lenses, are the colors and contrast these lenses give me. Many people complain about Sony's color science, but having used the Sigma Art series a lot, I think it might be more the lenses than their cameras. And now for the ultra bonus. I have created a comparison tool that lets you compare all these images side by side. Have a look at exposure-triangle.com/Sigma. I swear, you will love it!